Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to get into the world of Bob Camblin. He's an artist whose work, I think, really makes you think it's full of paradoxes. Um, and he just has this unique perspective on life and art and even the universe.
Yeah, his work really makes you stop and think. There's a depth there that draws you in.
Exactly. And today we're going to try to unlock some of those mysteries behind that vision. So, to do that, we've got a collection of his quotes and writings. We've got some snippets from his biography. And we're even going to look at some analysis of one of his paintings. It's called Message in a Bottle. Sometimes it's known as May Day.
Okay, wow. Quite a bit to unpack there.
There is. And so we're going to explore some of the recurring themes and philosophies that we're seeing in Camblin's work. We're especially interested in this blend of art, Zen philosophy, and reflections on what it even means to be human. Hopefully by the end you'll be left with some questions of your own and, maybe want to dig into Camblin's world a bit more.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin with someone like Camblin?
Well, his biography is a good place to start. It lists this huge number of exhibitions. And the guy worked in everything. Paintings, drawings, prints, watercolors. What's striking is just the length of his career. He wasn't just somebody who had a quick moment of fame. He was creating for decades.
And it wasn't just the variety of, the mediums he worked in. There are these consistent themes that keep popping up in the titles of his exhibitions. Chrysalis, Metamorphosis, Vanitas, even Doors.
Okay, so we're talking about transformation. We're talking about impermanence, hidden meanings behind everyday objects. It's almost like he's saying, don't just look, see.
Right, like he's inviting us to find the story within the story. And something tells me his fascination with Zen philosophy ties into all of this pretty strongly.
It definitely seems that way. In one of his writings, he says, the cosmos waves as me with tree leaves. What does that even mean?
That's classic Camblin, right? So much packed into a single sentence. It seems to me like he's expressing a sense of interconnectedness with nature. Like he's saying, we're not separate from the universe, but we're part of its fabric.
And if that's what he was trying to get at, it definitely comes through in his art. Which brings us to Message in a Bottle. We've got some analysis of it from both a book called Zen and the Art of Enlightenment and a YouTube video. And they both highlight how Zen principles are woven into the piece. You've got this decaying tree stump giving rise to new life, like ferns growing from its top. And then juxtaposed with that, is a skull, reminding us of impermanence.
Yeah, interesting they both pick up on that. But what stands out to you about the painting? Is it purely a visual representation of Zen philosophy, or is there more to it?
I think there's more to it. The analysis also linked the painting to hexagram 23 from the I Ching, splitting apart. And it's about how decay isn't just negative, but actually a necessary stage for renewal. And that kind of resonates with me.
Yeah, I can see why. It's like he's saying, hey, don't be afraid of things falling apart. Sometimes that's where the most interesting growth happens.
Now, Camblin also had some really strong opinions on the role of the artist and how art impacts society.
Oh, he did. He wasn't shy about expressing those views. One quote that jumped out at me was, the artist today is the only free agent. It's a bold statement.
He also said we may be moving to a participatory type of art, and art for art's sake has become art for life's sake. Clearly, he saw art as more than just pretty pictures. It had a purpose, maybe even a responsibility.
But he wasn't exactly thrilled with the state of the art world, was he? Especially what he called consumer art culture.
Right. He was worried that shock value and novelty were overshadowing thoughtfulness and true, artistic quality.
You can really see that frustration in his writing. He talked about a certain emptiness he saw in some art and how critics and historians were trying to fill that void with their interpretations. He even said the visual arts have finally become non-visual, which is a pretty brutal critique.
He also wrote, what compromise can one make at this time? What do you make of that? It feels almost like a personal struggle.
That really is cryptic, huh? Is he talking about compromises he felt he had to make as an artist? Or maybe the broader commentary on the art world itself? It's like he's inviting us to consider what compromises we all make in our own lives.
This brings us to something else that was really key to Camblin, his fascination with paradox. He seemed to love holding two opposing ideas in his mind at the same time.
Absolutely. It's like he saw truth in the tension between those opposing forces. There's this one quote where he says, bending is not bowing. It's such a simple statement, but there's so much depth to it.
Balancing and being for and against, resist and submit held in perfect balance. It's like he was constantly seeking a middle ground, but not in a bland, neutral way. More like he was trying to hold on to the energy of both sides at once.
He even talked about striving for a perfectly average view of the universe, acknowledging both the scientific and the magical. It's like he was saying there's room for logic and intuition, and finding that balance is where the real magic lies.
And this perfectly average view, it makes me think about his emphasis on observation and stillness.
Yes, he talks about how not a leaf moves and yet we all feel the cool breeze. It's like he's saying there's so much happening beneath the surface, so much we miss when we're rushing through life.
He even had an interest in haiku, which seems to fit perfectly with this idea of finding profound meaning in simple observations.
And this ties back into Message in a Bottle.
Hmm.
The stillness of that scene, the way the light filters through the leaves, it draws you in and makes you contemplate.
That's exactly what the YouTube analysis said. It's like the painting's composition, the way those discarded objects are integrated into the landscape. It encourages us to find meaning in simple things and trust the natural flow of creation.
It's almost like he's saying beauty and wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places if we just slow down and pay attention.
Speaking of unexpected places, Camblin was fascinated by what he called the mystic switch, these sudden bursts of insight or awareness that can be sparked by something totally ordinary. He talked about it like a rising hackle or a visceral knot. It's like you know something has shifted, even if you can't quite explain what it is.
And these moments, he believed they could happen anytime, anywhere, if you're open to them. It's about being present, being aware,
Yeah.
and being ready to be surprised.
That's such a great point. It makes you think about how we often go through life on autopilot, missing those little flashes of magic that are happening all around us.
Right, and Camblin was all about recognizing those flashes of magic, those glimpses into a deeper reality.
So we've talked about his view of the universe, his love of paradox, his
Huh.
emphasis on stillness. Now, where does language fit into all of this? Because he had a very complex relationship with words.
He did. On one hand, he could be so playful and almost mischievous with language. He once said, "When understood, all truth is funny," which I love.
That's so Camblin. It's like he's challenging us to find the humor and truth, to see things from a different perspective. But then he also acknowledged that language can be limiting.
You see that in his statement, if you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate. It's like he's saying there's a difference between exchanging information and truly connecting on a deeper level.
It's almost like he felt that sometimes words got in the way of real understanding.
Which makes me wonder, if words weren't enough for Camblin, how did he view the act of communicating through his art?
Let's dive into that next, because Camblin had a lot to say about visual communication and the power of art to speak beyond words. So if words weren't always enough for Camblin, how did he view communicating through his art?
Oh, he was so passionate about the power of visual communication. He even said, writing started as pictures nonverbal communication. Our syntax inhibits concepts that are not logical and linear.
So he felt like words kind of boxed us in, limited our ability to grasp more, complex or abstract ideas.
Exactly. He felt words forced us into this linear way of thinking that doesn't always capture the full picture.
But he didn't just critique language. He also had some pretty interesting thoughts on how we learn to create. He contrasted this idea that people are conditioned to believe there is a way to draw right with his own belief in recreation, not just representation.
It's that idea of tapping into something deeper through art, going beyond simply copying what we see and actually channeling something more primal.
He talked about this Zen mind, which sounds a bit mystical.
It does, doesn't it? But it makes sense when you think about it. He believed that activities like drawing, reading, listening to music, they could lull our conscious minds into this state of passive observation.
So we're less focused on thinking and analyzing and more open to receiving.
Exactly. And in that state, our Zen mind is free to roam, make connections, and have those aha moments of insight and inspiration.
Kind of like a state of flow, where the
Yeah.
artist becomes a conduit for something larger than themselves.
Precisely. And he even believed that those mystic switch moments, they could be triggered by the simplest things.
Like looking at a watercolor palette.
Exactly. He once wrote, "Everyone is a mirror, and that is magic." It's like he believed that everyone has the potential to reflect something unique and meaningful back to the world.
Which ties into his idea of interconnectedness. He saw it everywhere, from the cosmos to nature. He wrote, "The cosmos waves as me with tree leaves, and sun-heated air moves across the electrons of my skin." And these aren't just poetic metaphors. He genuinely felt this connection to the natural world.
And for Camblin, recognizing that connection was key to understanding our place in the universe.
Which brings us back to message in a bottle. The decaying stump, the ferns, the discarded bottle. It's all about the cyclical flow of existence, that constant interplay between creation and destruction.
Very zen. It makes you kind of reconsider your own relationship with nature. Do we see ourselves as separate from it? Or do we recognize our interconnectedness?
Big questions. And Camlin didn't shy away from them. He encouraged us to explore, to experiment, and to embrace the unknown. He said, one must learn not to look, but to see. One has tried to fail in order to succeed. Success will be another failure. Process and awareness of it cannot be failure.
It's a call to action, an invitation to step outside our comfort zones and be okay with things getting messy.
It's like he's saying failure is not the opposite of success, it's a stepping stone.
And his own artistic journey is a testament to that. He wasn't afraid to experiment, push boundaries, take risks. He understood that true creativity comes from embracing uncertainty.
Which reminds me, we were talking about his love of paradox earlier. It really feels like such a core part of who he was, both as an artist and a person.
Totally. There's this one quote that captures that perfectly. Resist and submit held in perfect balance. It's about finding that sweet spot between pushing back against the world and surrendering to forces larger than ourselves.
And recognizing that both resistance and submission are necessary for growth and transformation. It's about finding that perfectly average view we talked about earlier.
He was also fascinated by time, wasn't he?
Yes. He talked about time travel at the speed of enlightenment and how we are in fact living in the past, present, and looking into the future. It's like he saw time as a multidimensional tapestry, not just a straight line.
And he warned against dwelling too much on the past, saying, nostalgia like guests and fish shouldn't be kept too long. He seemed to believe that it hinders our ability to be present and embrace, future possibilities.
It's a good reminder to live fully in the now, but also acknowledge how past experiences shape us. But I think one of the most important takeaways from all of this is how much he emphasized being present and observing the world with, open eyes and an open heart.
And to find beauty in the paradoxes and complexities of life.
As we were preparing for this deep dive, I was really struck by Camblin's thoughts on art education. He was clearly passionate about teaching, and his writings offer such a unique perspective on the creative process.
Yeah, he really seemed to focus on helping his students find their own voices and develop their own styles, rather than trying to fit them into a mold.
There's this one note where he writes about how historians love artistic madness when it isn't alive and well and attending meetings. Almost like he's poking fun at the way the art world romanticizes the tortured artist trope.
And he wasn't a fan of emphasizing technique over concept either. He even went so far as to say facility is like the Midas touch, almost like too much skill could hinder true creativity.
It makes you think about how we sometimes focus so much on the technical aspects of art that we lose sight of the heart, the message, the soul behind it.
He believed that true art came from a place of authenticity, from a deep connection with your inner world. Technique was important, but it should serve the concept, not the other way around.
He also had some really interesting thoughts on the role of play in the creative process. He encouraged his students to play the game as if your life depended on it. Why fear and doubt in a harmless course like drawing? It's about letting go of self-consciousness and finding joy in the process.
And he believed that playful approach could lead to genuine breakthroughs. He wrote about how the hunch, the inspiration, the solution can appear as if by magic when we relax, experiment, and trust our intuition.
So for Camblin, it was about finding that balance between effort and surrender, conscious control and unconscious flow.
And recognizing that sometimes the most profound insights come when we least expect them. It seems like his approach to art education was all about nurturing curiosity, playfulness, and a sense of fearlessness in his students.
He wanted them to embrace the unknown, experiment without judgment, and find their own unique ways of expressing themselves. He didn't see art as a destination, but as a journey of self-discovery.
And he really stressed the importance of staying true to your own vision, letting your art flow from a place of genuine passion and authenticity.
That brings us back to those mystic switch moments he kept talking about, and the importance of stillness and observation for connecting with your inner world and tapping into that creative flow.
There's definitely a common thread running through all of these ideas, this need to cultivate a sense of awareness, both of ourselves and the world around us.
Being present, paying attention, and recognizing that everything is connected.
Trusting your intuition, allowing yourself to be surprised, and embracing the messy beauty of it all.
It sounds wonderful, but I can't help but wonder, what did Camblin think about the role of the artist in a world that was constantly changing? We've touched on his frustration with consumer art culture, but I think there's more to unpack there.
You're right, there was a tension there between creating truly meaningful art and navigating a world obsessed with shock and novelty.
So we've talked about Camblin's frustration with consumer art culture. Did he leave any clues about how he navigated that tension?
He did. In one note, he writes, "In a time of consumer art, to make something truly unique in its intimacy and yet projecting a solidity that won't be dismissed by superficial perusal, puts me in a bind." You get a sense of his struggle to create meaningful work in a world that prioritizes the superficial.
It sounds like he felt trapped between this desire to create lasting art and the pressure of a market that thrives on trends.
Right, and it makes you think, how do artists stay true to their vision when the world seems to demand something new every minute?
Especially for someone like Camblin, who believed so strongly in the power of art to connect us to something deeper, something more meaningful.
Right. He saw art as a way to grapple with life's big questions. And he worried that this focus on shock value and novelty was preventing art from reaching its full potential.
He even wrote, "Most aesthetics now are based on shock and recognition, not contemplation. Quality is a more ephemeral aspect of the problem." It's like he felt art was losing its soul, becoming more about grabbing attention than sparking genuine thought.
And this might be why he emphasized the process of creation so much. You know, finding your own voice, staying true to your own vision. He believed that true art comes from an authentic place, not from chasing trends or trying to please the market.
He also didn't seem to like being put in a box by the art world. He wasn't fond of critics and historians, was he?
He really wasn't. He felt like they often forced their own interpretations onto art, taking away from its original meaning.
He even compared them to a legless man who teaches running. It's a harsh comparison, but you see his point. He felt like they were detached from the experience of creating and therefore couldn't truly understand it.
He believed that art should speak for itself, that it should be experienced directly without needing someone to explain it.
Which brings us back to his fascination with the mystic switch. Those moments of pure, unfiltered experience where you connect with something bigger than yourself.
He believed those moments are available to anyone, not just artists, and that they're crucial to unlocking our creative potential.
So it's about cultivating a sense of wonder and openness, being present, and allowing yourself to be surprised by what you find.
And here's the thing. He believed that true meaning and beauty aren't found in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary, the everyday moments that we often miss.
He wanted us to find the mystic switch in a watercolor palette, in rustling leaves, in the way sunlight touches our skin. He challenged us to see the world with fresh eyes and to appreciate the simple things.
He reminded us that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that the process of creation is just as valuable as the finished product.
Maybe that's the core of Camblin's message. Art isn't just about creating beautiful things, it's about living a more beautiful life.
It's about being present, aware, appreciating what's around you, and recognizing that everything is connected.
It's about finding meaning in the everyday, beauty in the unexpected, and inspiration in the ordinary.
Embracing the paradoxes, the contradictions, the messy, beautiful complexity of it all.
Camblin challenges us to find those messages in stillness, to see opportunities for transformation in unexpected places, maybe even in those things we initially perceive as decay or discard. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a powerful idea. Camblin's work is full of these hidden layers, these invitations to look deeper, to see the world through his unique lens.
We've only scratched the surface today, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a taste of his vision and inspired you to explore his work further.
He's definitely an artist worth spending time with. Contemplate his words, experience his art, and see what resonates with you.
And until next time, keep diving deep and keep those mystic switches turned on.